yeah, okay, you know the job description, you could do it, but like, what else can you do? What can you go up and beyond about? And that could be something totally not science related. Like I brought Microsoft Teams to my coworkers and like, hey, this is like a really great tool that we can collaborate on. Like it's like something silly like that.
Right. Hello, folks. Thank you for joining our live career discussion today. I'm Jeff Kozlowski. I'm a senior marketing communications manager with our School of Medicine and Dentistry here at University of Rochester. I'm so excited to bring you this, again, career discussion today with Alyssa Flores. She is currently scientific program manager at the Health and Environmental Sciences Institute down in Washington, D.C. She graduated from our Translational Biomedical Science program, Ph.D. program in 2018. She was also part of the prep program, which we'll talk about here today as well. And super excited for this conversation. We'll talk about her career journey, working in the nonprofit world, things like networking and imposter syndrome and all that good stuff. So let me bring her in here. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, Jeff, and for the University of Rochester as well. Excited to dive in.
First, Alyssa, can you just give us, I did a very brief introduction for you a minute ago, but if you can tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I like to say I am bi-coastal, grew up in LA and also Rochester, New York. I went to undergrad in Stony Brook University in Long Island and then ventured off back into the prep program after working for a year. Went back to University of Rochester and then went to the PhD program, like you said, in the translational program. And then realized, the lab wasn't for me. And then I can explain maybe more during our Q&A about how I came about and how I found my job, but through networking, but went to the nonprofit world and realized there's so many opportunities out there. And that's the space that I like to be in and stay in. And yeah, so now here I am in Washington, D.C. at the Health and Environmental Sciences Institute as the scientific program officer or manager.
All right. So yeah, let's dive into a little bit more of that background. I would love to hear a little bit about how you ended up at University of Rochester a few years ago.
Yeah. So during undergrad, I'm about to take a step back. I was part of this Mark NIH fellowship where it gave underrepresented minorities, access to research. And so I actually worked in 2 research labs because I was crazy, just to get, 2 different experiences. And that's when I, fell in love with like microimmunology there, working in an HIV lab. And part of this Mark fellowship is where you had to kind of like promise that you're going to pursue your PhD. And so it gave a lot of resources to understand what a PhD is. But, like I said, I worked in 2 labs and I was just having burnout. So then I worked for a few years in Long Island and then, I was ready to dive back in. And then, learned about different post-bac programs because I had imposter syndrome and didn't realize that I had enough to actually apply for a PhD program. So I did this post-bac program at the University of Rochester. And that's when, I, applied to other PhD programs, learned about PhD programs. Through this post-bac, I was able to take GRE courses. I was able to take graduate level courses with the fellow PhD students. The prep program at University of Rochester was very instrumental in, getting into my grad program. I ultimately decided to stay at the University of Rochester for personal reasons, and it's a great school. I think the translational program is so unique, and interdisciplinary programs are, I think, the way of the future. I think all programs are kind of pushing more towards that. And so, yeah, that's how I ended up at the University of Rochester.
All right. And you hit on a couple things there. Let's dive into imposter syndrome a little bit. What exactly were you feeling that for, and you said, did the prep program sort of help you through that? And if so, sort of what specific things did you get out of the prep program to sort of overcome that?
Well, I'll just premise this that imposter syndrome probably never goes away. It just dampens over time.
There you go.
And still working through that, to this day, but definitely much better than when I was a postback. And what really helped me get through that, I would say, is one, myself, but also having peers to support you. I think the people that were in my postback program, shout out to them, appreciate their support during that time, but also mentors. And Edith Lord was the dean at the time and the prep program director at the time as well, who really supported me, believed in me, and even my advisor in the lab at the time too. And having that support and realizing, like, wow, like these, very intelligent people believe in me. Why can I believe in myself? And I remember Edith Lord was saying, you could have just applied straight away to your PhD program and could have got in. And, that gave me the kind of boost that I needed. And okay, this prestigious person believes in me and, I can too. But even when I got into grad school, I remember kind of sitting in my first class thinking, I knew I was smart, right? Like I know I'm smart, but I felt like the dumbest of the smart people in that room. But I overcame it. I had good grades in grad school, so I don't know why I felt that way at the time.
Yeah, and we'll touch on maybe this then. We'll touch on more of that as far as imposter syndrome a little bit later. So let's now talk about the transition from graduate school to finding your career in the nonprofit world. You mentioned you realized you weren't going to go into academia. It wasn't for you. So what was that transition like? You graduated with your PhD. How did you end up going the nonprofit route?
Yeah, so maybe I'll take a step back. So I had written an F-31 pre-doctoral grant, and I realized, like, wow, I do not want to write grants the rest of my life. Even though I'm still kind of doing it right now in my job, I thought I would get away from it. But I realized it wasn't at the bench where I wanted to be. And so I did so many like informational interviews during my last year in grad school and trying to figure out what is that job I want to do. And then what sparks my interest, my passion. And that really was science communication. I love presenting my data. Like that was my favorite part in grad school, was presenting my data to fellow scientists and also to lay audiences that knew nothing about science. I was a science outreach coordinator while at the University of Rochester as well. And how can I was trying to find ways of how can I fine tune that. And so in grad school, I took all the courses that you could. I took workshops over and over again for writing, even for grant writing, even though I didn't want to do that. I knew it was important. No matter what career you're in, writing is very, very important. And would present. I think I presented at like the Wilmart Cancer Symposium every year, even though my project had nothing to do with cancer. And same with lung biology, I would present every year, and I won both of those awards. I don't know how, but I just think just like my enthusiasm, and I think when you're passionate about something, that transcends to your audience, and they care too. And so that's something that I wanted to pursue, and just talking with different people, I realized, and through networking, that there was this job at the Milken Institute Center of Strategic Philanthropy where it was science communication. You were coordinating with lay audiences, and with that lay audience was the general public, because we did a lot of public reports and we did a lot of conferences. I was a moderator and speaker at some of those, but also with our kind of partners who are kind of like clients, right? It's kind of consulting kind of position where we worked with philanthropists and also other fellow nonprofits. And so if they had, a disease that they were interested to fund, let's say neurofibromatosis, that I helped be a grants manager for, I would have to get my mini PhD in a field that I was never in, right? I was never in neuro. And that's also exciting and challenging for me. I had the deep dive, who are the key opinion leaders in that field? What are the conferences? What are the latest papers? Where are the gaps? Where are the funding gaps? I never thought I'd be looking at, tax returns or grant funding. and kind of find like figuring out like how can we solve problems, and if we philanthropists, have this capital to give, where what's our recommendation where it should be valued the most, like where's the gaps, where's the science not being funded. And I think that's what really intrigued me to first go into that field, because it was something totally different, something that would challenge me, and it's like all communication, right? So it's communicating with fellow scientists in the field. I would create workshops with all of these different interdisciplinary scientists. So if it was neurofibromatosis, we would get the eye doctors, we would get the neuro doctors and neurosurgeons, we would get the gene editing folks all in the same room, and how we can combat this problem using new methods and high risk. So, yeah, that was kind of how I found that opportunity was actually through a fellow PhD graduate student, older senior grad student in my lab. He forwarded me an email because I told him like, hey, if you ever see any opportunities in the science communication field, like let me know. And so he forwarded me, this opportunity, and he gave that introduction, even though he didn't really know this other person too well. Um, you know, what I've learned from informational interviews, once you do one, you're like, hey, can you connect me to another person? People are more than happy to do that, if you come off as a kind of genuine and wanting to learn and be understanding.
I was talking to another alum not too long ago about their sort of networking and job, uh, getting a job and how they got a job and how big of a part networking was. And she was talking about just how, someone that she went to grad school with, they weren't close friends. They weren't enemies by any means, but they were not,
Yeah.
they knew of each other. They presented research together a few times, or they heard each other present their research. They graduated, went their separate ways, but connected on LinkedIn very early on, and the one person got a job at a company, and it was a very small company, and he thought of her for a role they were hiring just because they were friendly to each other, and she was
Mhm.
nice and knew she would do a good job, and reached out to her, said, hey, what are you doing these days? And that's how the job came to be for her. So you hit on networking a little bit there, but clearly it's such a key for just not necessarily even just getting a job, but just advancing your career. And you've written a little bit on networking for SMD, for a blog we run. Can you talk a little bit more about some of your specific tips for networking? Like, I know you talk a lot about even using Excel files, like they can be your best friend, and how
Mhm.
you go about doing some of that stuff.
Yeah. So I guess my advice is like your peers are your future colleagues, right? So even if you never work together, like someone they may know may help you get a job one day. So even if you're not closest friends, that doesn't matter. Like people are going to remember you, remember the work you did. And even like I said, the senior person in my grad school, we only overlapped 3 months and stayed in touch after he went to his postdoc. And even through all his career, I've been following it. And so it's always good to check in once in a while with those folks, especially when you don't want something, right? um, so you know I like to stay organized, and I excel and I make spreadsheets and I do all the things, even like looking for apartments. So whatever the way you like to stay organized, recommend that. But I like to, keep an Excel file and say, I checked in this person, maybe, it's been 6 months, or once a year you check in. And even if it's just like, hey, how are you doing? How are the kids? Or what are you up to lately? Sometimes with, even with my current job, we do a lot of career outreach as well. I helped set up career panels and mentor programs, and I've reached out to my fellow alum at University of Rochester, and even share opportunities with University of Rochester for graduate like awards as well. Because your alum is like your family, right? It's like a work school. I feel like when you're PhD, it's not really like work. It's like a limbo kind of world. And like you said, like some person that like, oh, I thought of for a job. I also reached out to this person. Like I wasn't close friends with her. I was like, hey, I think you'd be good for this job. They said no, but like, you can't. Like, I think those connections are important.
Maybe can we expand a little bit more? I was thinking if folks are watching that are interested in going the nonprofit route and they here you're a scientific program manager. I know we touched on it a little bit, but can you go over again and kind of exactly what a scientific program manager does for the Health and Environmental Sciences Institute in Washington, D.C., kind of what your day-to-day looks like, and just some of the key responsibilities in your role?
Yeah. So I co-manage three large committees, which is the Cardiac Safety Committee, the Immunosafety Committee, which is also like immunotox, as well as the Genetic Toxicology Committee. And so to keep them, I guess, generic, they're all different kind of science fields. The committee is made up of volunteers through multi-sectors. So people from pharma, CROs, clinicians, academics, and people from regulatory agencies. So like FDA and NIH, but also we're global. So like, the FDA of in Germany, like BFARM, and Japan as well in the UK. So it's a very unique position. You learn a lot, and you get to meet a lot of very important people and a lot of experts. And so we bring these experts in to our committees to kind of advance our mission. And so each committee has their own mission to advance immunosafety field and technologies. So each committee is kind of bucketed into work groups, and those work groups can go down to smaller and smaller sub teams on different projects. And so one project maybe I can highlight immune safety that I help to manage is the first in human dose project. And so that's trying to optimize immunomodulator drugs first in human dose. So when you go from preclinical and animal model to a human model, what are the ways that we can optimize that, and what are each organizations doing? And so I think the beauty of my job in HESI is that they do collaborative science, and it's pushing the field forward. So people from Pfizer and Novartis will actually share their data and share their case studies that are not published through us, the third party, to really better advance the science. So we're doing case studies from the different organizations, from the different pharma organizations, and writing a white paper on that to kind of give kind of best practices and considerations when choosing a first in human dosing for clinical trials. And so part of my job is, to moderate, keep people on track. People have all of their opinions, especially scientists. And so trying to stay on the agenda, do administrative things like take notes, meeting minutes, send them out, send meeting reminders. Sometimes, help to outline the manuscript. So not every manuscript, managers will be an author on, but if we contribute enough, we will be on those papers. And we help with the study design. We contribute to, the different conferences and abstracts that we're doing. And, we put on lots of workshops. And so we'll also invite external members to that as well, because, we want, if we're doing a best practices or high level recommendations in a certain project, we want, the experts in all the fields, even if they're not a member of our organization. So day to day, I'll have lots of meetings and for all the different committees and the projects. And, like I said, I'm also helping writing different grants for our organization on certain projects. And I would say one of my favorite parts that I'm passionate about is, giving back to education outreach and mentorship. And so one of my committees has a whole work group dedicated to that. But all of my committees now also have awards. So if you go to I can send you the link at hesiglobal.org. We're going to launch a new trainee page. So we have over 16 committees. And so each one of them, not all of them, but some of them are launching all their different graduate program awards for, travel awards, for supporting PhD stipends, pilot awards, and also doing mentorship one-on-one programs as well. And also career webinars, and then seminar series. So for postdocs and early career scientists to come to our committees to share their new emerging science, their science, and to kind of network with our experts.
Awesome. Thank you for all that
And
info. I also want to ask, and I've heard, other folks say stuff like this. When you were in grad school here at SMD, at that time, did you know a role like this existed, or did you ever like kind of see yourself going in this direction? I'm always interested in kind of how
yeah,
like people feel going into graduate school thinking one thing, and then end up doing something not necessarily totally different, but outside of what sort of they thought might be possible, and that's totally okay.
yeah. Yeah, going into grad school, I totally thought I was going to be a professor, write grants, and that's what I really wanted to do. And I think it's okay that you change what you want to do. And I, like I said, I did get that F-31 grant, and if I wanted to go to that route, I know I would be successful. But I wanted to do something I'm more passionate about, and I had no idea the career that I'm doing right now was out there.
Mm.
And you do that through, networking, listening to these career webinars, um, doing the outreach on your own time, right? You have to educate yourself as well. And I think schools are also doing a better job at that as well, like you are having me here today.
Yes.
Um, but so other careers, like I just mentioned in the nonprofit space, so like there's a lot of journals, right? So you could work for an editorial journal, but not just doing manuscript. They also have outreach programs. They have like scientific manager programs like I'm doing.
Mhm.
Smaller societies like AAI. AAI does, science policy. They do mentorship programs. They do science. Like they do a lot of things like SOT. And so there's also nonprofit foundations. So like the Lupus Research Foundation, like there's specific disease foundations out there that you could work for. There's like, the Gates Foundation. They do a lot of science awarding. And so there's like a lot of grants managers position as well. And I think in maybe people that kind of sounds boring to be a grants manager, but it's actually pretty cool because you're at the forefront of like, okay, what needs to be funded, like in the back end, like what needs to be funded, what are the gaps in the fields, and what kind of LOI, like letters of intentions, are we looking for to possibly fund and like move the whole field forward in that.
How easy was it for you to settle into life in Rochester? Any special advice for prospective students like himself?
Yeah. Okay. So I was born in Los Angeles, so Cali girl. But then I moved to Rochester when I was 8, actually. And then, like I said, I went to Long Island and lived in New York City after college. And so I vowed never to move back to Rochester. So moving back was like from New York City was kind of hard for me, but it is a cold city. I don't know where you're from, but I like to say I was facing adversity. Living in Rochester, I was like, I would walk. I would walk even in wintertime because I live less than a mile away. So I would just walk. So I'm like, I'm building character right now. Okay.
There you go.
Um, and I always joke like, science doesn't sleep. You gotta like go take care of your cells. But preparing, if you're moving from a totally different area, it will be a culture shock maybe, but just be prepared for that and just kind of embrace it. Your fellow grad students or your classmates are going to be like kind of your new family, and try to find your people. Do take breaks. I would remember working like 12-hour days in labs, but take breaks, have fun, work hard, play hard.
There we go.
So yeah, I would just, try to find activities, hobbies outside of school. That's
There you go.
I think
And,
Rochester is one of the beautiful, like it's so beautiful. We actually have
yes.
4 seasons there. So I
Yes.
think it's a beautiful, beautiful outdoorsy place.
Do you think there are opportunities in this field in the Rochester area, or how flexible is it to do remote work in this field?
Yes. So I would say a lot of jobs are moving more remote. I go in the office only one day a week. But a lot of them are shifting towards remote. So if you wanted to stay in Rochester, that apply for remote jobs that are similar to mine. And for the Rochester area, yeah, there's foundations there as well. There's I don't know about nonprofits, but there's like science, like non-lab science jobs in Rochester for sure. Depending like what do you want to do?
What is the career trajectory for someone in your specific position? What's next?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have huge ambitions. One day I see myself kind of running a nonprofit, being CEO one day. And that's something I see for myself. And so I guess for my next career step, I want to maybe step back from the sciencey, like, molecular pathways and study designs. I want to be more high level, more strategic of, what an organization needs. Okay, like what's the new emerging science? What area should we be in? So kind of mixing like the business side with, the strategic side and the science. Because I have that knowledge of the PhD, right? I mean, not that you need a PhD, but I have that science background and the critical thinking skills and the strategic planning. So, like, I do strategic planning on the committee level, the project level, but I want it next to do it on a whole organization side.
Awesome. And I do want to get to. I know we're running to the end of this. In some of our conversations leading up to this, Alyssa, you talked a lot about being your authentic self, and maybe hit on that a little bit at the beginning. But I do want to give you an opportunity to just give your thoughts on the importance of being your authentic self, and any final thoughts you have for our audience before we wrap up soon.
Yeah, I think ending on your authentic self is kind of the most important kind of key thing I want to touch on and tell everybody. I think I got to where I am because of my authentic self, right? Everyone, when you're applying for a job, everyone has a PhD or everyone has that science background. There's going to be lots of applicants that have the same, neuroscience background that you may have. And so what sets you apart is who you are and how you can work with others. And so those soft skills are super, super important. And thinking outside the box. So when you're interviewing, they're like, yeah, okay, you know the job description, you could do it, but like, what else can you do? What can you go up and beyond about? And that could be something totally not science related. Like I brought Microsoft Teams to my coworkers and like, hey, this is like a really great tool that we can collaborate on. Like it's like something silly like that, right? So if and show your passion, right? So I'm always my authentic self. I know I may have come off like slightly less professional than some of my colleagues, but that's just who I am. And I don't like to use fluff words or big words. And, I'm just who I am. And if that's who you are, that's who you are as well. And when you come off as genuine and people want to work with you, right? And when people see your passion, they also feel that passion and they get excited about the job too. And so, that's just my best advice when looking for a job is just be yourself.
Alyssa, can you let folks know if they want to follow up with you, other than maybe in this comment section? Where might they connect with you?
Yeah, feel free to add me on LinkedIn or send me a message on LinkedIn. And thank you for having me, Jeff. I appreciate, everyone listening and all your questions and happy to connect further.